A single dad, exhausted and desperate, hires a night nurse to care for his sick son. But what he doesn't know is that she isn't who she claims to be. And the truth about her will change everything. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below, and let's get started with this story. Ethan Cole was tired. Really tired. Every night, he sat at the edge of his son's bed, listening to Liam struggle to sleep. At just 8 years old, Liam had already faced more nights of illness than most people face in a lifetime. His condition kept him restless, coughing, and awake until the early hours of the morning. Ethan did everything he could. He worked long days, kept the household running, and cared for Liam around the clock. But exhaustion was catching up with him. He was only one person, and no matter how much he wanted to, he couldn't be awake 24 hours a day. That's when he realized he needed help. Not during the day, he could manage that. But at night. Someone to stay with Liam so Ethan could finally close his eyes and rest without worry. And so, he made a choice. He hired a night nurse. Her name was Claire Whitmore. She looked kind, gentle, the type of person you'd want by your child's side. On paper, she seemed perfect, professional, experienced, and trustworthy. At first, it felt like relief. For the first time in months, Ethan believed things might finally get easier. But what Ethan didn't know was that Claire wasn't exactly who she said she was. And soon, the truth about her would change everything. For him, for Liam, and for the future he never saw coming. Ethan Cole's life wasn't supposed to look like this. In his early 30s, he was strong, capable, and hardworking. The kind of man people might assume had it all together. But behind the front door of his quiet suburban home, reality told a different story. Ethan was a single father, and every single day felt like a battle. His son, Liam, was only 8 years old. A sweet, gentle boy with big brown eyes and a smile that could light up any room, on the rare days when illness didn't dim it. Liam had been diagnosed with a chronic condition that made even the simplest nights complicated. While other children his age slept peacefully, Liam struggled with fatigue, coughing fits, and long, restless hours that stretched deep into the night. For Ethan, that meant sleeplessness became the norm. He spent night after night sitting at Liam's bedside, reading him stories, holding his hand, whispering words of comfort until dawn finally broke. And then, without rest, Ethan had to face the demands of the day. Work, bills, cooking, cleaning, everything a household required, all on his shoulders alone. There were mornings he would drag himself out the door with barely any strength left, his mind foggy, his body aching for just a few hours of real rest. And yet, no matter how tired he became, he never let Liam see the full weight of it. Ethan pushed himself to smile, to reassure his son that things would be okay, even when he wasn't sure how much longer he could keep it up. The truth was, Ethan was burning out. He loved his son more than anything in this world. That love gave him strength. But he couldn't escape the exhaustion that lived in his bones, the quiet fear that one day he might collapse from sheer fatigue, and Liam would need him, and he wouldn't be able to answer. There were times, late at night, when he'd sit in the living room with his head in his hands, wondering if he was failing, wondering if he could really do this alone. But he had no choice. He was Liam's father, his protector, his everything. And that's why, when the opportunity came to bring in someone to help, even just at night, Ethan found himself considering it. At first, he felt guilty. Asking for help wasn't easy. It almost felt like admitting weakness. But deep down, he knew it wasn't about him anymore. It was about Liam. And if a nurse could stay by his son's side through the long nights, then maybe, just maybe, Ethan could finally rest enough to keep going. It was a small hope. But to Ethan, It felt like the only way forward. He didn't know it yet, but that decision would change everything. The night Claire Whitmore first stepped into Ethan's home, everything felt different. Ethan opened the door to find her standing there, framed by the porch light. She carried herself with a kind of calm confidence, the kind that immediately put people at ease. Blonde hair gently pulled back, clear blue eyes that seemed to notice everything at once, and a soft smile that didn't feel forced. She wasn't dressed like the strict, uniformed nurses Ethan had pictured in his mind. Instead, she wore something simple, comfortable, approachable. She looked less like a professional walking into a job and more like a friend who had arrived to help. For a moment, Ethan just stood there, caught between relief and hesitation. He had spent weeks debating this decision, and now, here she was. "Mr. Cole," she asked softly. "I'm Claire." Her voice was gentle, reassuring, almost musical. Ethan nodded and stepped aside, letting her in. Inside, the house was quiet. Liam was upstairs, resting for now. The living room lights were low, the faint hum of the baby monitor on the table filling the silence. Ethan explained the routine, Liam's medications, the small rituals that helped him fall asleep, the signs to watch for if his coughing fits grew worse. Claire listened carefully, nodding, never interrupting. She asked questions, but not in a clinical, detached way. She asked like someone who genuinely cared. Ethan noticed that. And yet, a part of him remained guarded. This was his son, the most important part of his life. Handing over even a piece of that responsibility to someone he barely knew felt unnatural. He had spent so long doing everything himself that trusting a stranger, even one with glowing references, didn't come easy. But then Liam appeared. A quiet shuffle of footsteps on the stairs, followed by the small, tired figure of his son peeking into the room. Brown hair messy, pajamas slightly too big, clutching his worn-out stuffed bear. Claire's expression softened instantly. She crouched down, meeting Liam's eyes at his level. "Hi there," she said warmly. "You must be Liam. I've heard so much about you." For a moment, Liam hid behind his bear, shy. But something about her presence seemed to chip away at his hesitation. Slowly, he stepped forward. Ethan watched, surprised, as Liam's shoulders relaxed. His son, the boy who usually took so long to warm up to new people, was already leaning closer, curious about this stranger who didn't feel so much like a stranger. Claire pulled a small book from her bag. "I brought something for tonight," she said. "Thought maybe we could read a story together." Liam's eyes lit up. That spark, that rare, fleeting spark of excitement, hit Ethan like a wave. He hadn't seen his son light up like that in so long. It was in that moment Ethan felt something shift. Maybe this wasn't just another nurse. Maybe she really could be the help they needed. Still, in the back of his mind, doubt lingered. He didn't know her. Not really. And though her smile was warm and her touch seemed gentle, there was something unspoken, that he couldn't quite place. But for now, as he watched Liam's laughter return in small bursts while Claire read aloud from her book, Ethan chose to push those doubts aside. For the first time in months, his home didn't feel so heavy. For the first time in months, Liam wasn't just surviving, he was smiling. And Ethan, well, he found himself wondering if maybe, just maybe, this woman's arrival was more than just a coincidence. He couldn't have known then that the very secret she carried would one day test the fragile trust now beginning to grow. The nights that followed Claire's arrival began to look different. For so long, Ethan had grown used to the heavy routine, the endless coughing, the sleepless hours, the constant fear that something might go wrong if he let his eyes close, even for a moment. But now, for the first time in years, he wasn't facing it alone. Claire slipped into the rhythm of their lives almost seamlessly. She knew when to step in and when to step back. At night, she would sit by Liam's bed, reading softly until his breathing slowed, her voice steady and soothing like a lullaby. And when the coughing fits came, and they always did, she never flinched. She was right there, calm, steady, ready with water, medicine, and reassurance. Ethan would sometimes linger in the hallway, watching. He would see the way she smoothed Liam's hair, the way she whispered encouragement, the way she never rushed, never showed frustration. There was a patience about her, a quiet strength that filled the room. And Liam, he responded. It wasn't immediate, but night after night, little changes appeared. His laughter came more easily. His fears at bedtime seemed lighter. He began to ask if Claire could read to him, if she could be the one to tuck him in. And though a small part of Ethan felt replaced, another part of him felt something else, relief. Relief that Liam finally had someone who could give him comfort in ways he alone could not. The days began to change too. With Claire caring for Liam through the night, Ethan was able to rest, even just for a few hours at a time. It wasn't much, but it was enough to breathe again. Enough to wake up and face the day without feeling like he was about to collapse. He found himself rediscovering parts of life he had nearly forgotten. The taste of morning coffee when he wasn't running on fumes. The rare feeling of stepping outside to take in the fresh air, instead of rushing from one obligation to the next. And more than anything, he noticed how Liam's spirits seemed to rise. His son was still sick, yes, but he was smiling again, playing again, talking with a light in his eyes that Ethan hadn't seen in far too long. And through it all, there was Claire. She wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was becoming part of their small, fragile world. Ethan would catch himself watching her, how she laughed at Liam's silly jokes, how she stayed late to wash the dishes she wasn't asked to, how she carried herself with kindness in even the smallest details. And yet, as much as he admired her, there was something about Claire he couldn't quite understand. Sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, her smile would fade. Her eyes would carry a heaviness, a shadow of something left unsaid. Ethan noticed. He wasn't sure what it meant, but the thought lingered quietly in the back of his mind. Still, in those days, he chose not to question it. For once, his home felt alive again. For once, Liam was happy. And for Ethan, that was enough. What he didn't know, of course, was that these moments, these fragile, beautiful nights of healing, were built on a secret Claire had yet to reveal. A secret that, once uncovered, would test the very foundation of the trust they were building together. But for now, all Ethan saw was a man finally catching his breath, a boy finally laughing again, and a woman who had quietly become the light in their darkest nights. For a while, everything seemed perfect. The house was calmer. Liam was happier. Ethan was finally able to rest. But perfection never lasts. And slowly, small cracks began to appear. At first, Ethan didn't notice. Claire was kind, patient, everything he hoped she would be. But little moments began to tug at his attention. It was the way she sometimes avoided certain questions. When he casually asked where she'd trained, or what hospital she had worked at, her answers felt vague, short, as if she was carefully stepping around the details. One night, after Liam had finally drifted off, Ethan found Claire in the kitchen. She was making tea, the soft glow of the light above the stove casting shadows across her face. He asked about one of the medications, a routine question, something any nurse would know. But instead of answering right away, she hesitated. Just for a second. Long enough for Ethan to notice. Then she spoke, calm and confident, as if nothing had been wrong. But that pause, it stayed with him. It happened again, a few days later. Liam had a rough night, coughing so hard he nearly made himself sick. Claire stayed by his side, steady as always, but Ethan caught something in her expression, a flicker of uncertainty, the kind of look that comes not from lack of care, but lack of training. Ethan brushed it off, told himself he was imagining things. After all, Liam was improving. Claire was doing good work. She was good for them. Wasn't that enough? But the doubts didn't leave. He started paying closer attention, watching the way she handled medicine bottles, noticing how she avoided medical jargon, how her explanations never went deeper than the basics. The more he looked, the more questions piled up. And yet, he didn't confront her. Not yet. Because there was something else. Something that made it harder. He saw the way Liam lit up around her. The way his son, his sweet boy who had spent so long sick and withdrawn, was laughing again, talking again, opening up in ways he hadn't in months. Ethan couldn't deny it. Claire had given Liam something priceless. Something no doctor or hospital had been able to give. A sense of safety, of comfort, of hope. And so, Ethan kept his doubts to himself. For now. But deep down, he knew the truth. There was something about Claire that didn't add up. And it was only a matter of time before the cracks in her story grew too wide to ignore. The truth always finds a way out. And for Ethan, it came on an ordinary night. He had been searching for something in the living room, Liam's medication schedule, scribbled down by the doctor. It wasn't where he thought it was, so he checked Claire's bag, hoping she had tucked it away after helping earlier. That's when he saw it. Papers. A folder, neat but worn, with documents that didn't match what he expected. No nursing license. No certifications. Instead, old coursework. Notes from medical school. And at the very top, a letter of withdrawal. Ethan froze. The words blurred in front of him. Student withdrawal. Program incomplete. She wasn't a nurse. Not officially. Not at all. His chest tightened, anger burning through the fatigue he had been carrying for months. All this time, he had trusted her. Let her care for Liam. Let her into their lives. And she had lied. When Claire walked into the room, she saw the papers in his hands, and she knew. The look on his face said it all. Ethan, she whispered, her voice unsteady. I can explain. But he didn't want explanations. Not yet. The hurt was too sharp. You're not a nurse, he said. His voice was low, but it carried the weight of betrayal. You've been in my home with my son, and you're not who you said you were. Claire tried to speak, but every word seemed to catch in her throat. I trusted you, Ethan went on. Do you understand what you've done? What could have happened if something went wrong? You put Liam at risk. My son. His anger wasn't loud, but it was devastating. Years of fear, exhaustion, and responsibility all crashing into one raw moment. And Claire, she didn't fight back. She didn't argue. She simply stood there, eyes full of tears she tried to hold back, her hands trembling at her sides. Finally, she said, You're right. I should have told you. I should have been honest. But Ethan, please. I never meant to hurt you. Or Liam. Everything I've done has been to help him. To help you. But the words only stung more. Because in that moment, Ethan couldn't see her compassion, or her patience, or the nights she had spent at Liam's bedside. All he could see was the lie. He turned away, unable to look at her, unable to reconcile the warmth she had brought into their lives with the deception that now threatened to shatter it all. For the first time since Claire had arrived, the house no longer felt safe. Claire didn't try to defend herself with excuses. She didn't raise her voice or attempt to argue her way out of the corner she was in. Instead, she stood there quietly, holding back tears, before finally speaking the words that had been weighing on her heart since the day she first walked into Ethan's home. She told him she hadn't always been this way, that there was a time when she had been on the exact path he believed she was on. She had been a medical student, full of ambition, full of promise. Her dream had always been to heal, to care for people, to make a difference. And she had been close, so close to becoming the very nurse Ethan thought he had hired. But life had not been kind. Her mother fell sick. A long, drawn-out illness that drained her family of every resource, every ounce of strength. Claire tried to keep up with her studies while also taking care of her mother, but eventually, the weight became too heavy. Between hospital visits, bills, and grief pressing in from every side, she broke. She withdrew from her program, unable to carry both her education and the crushing responsibilities waiting for her at home. She looked at Ethan then, her voice trembling as she admitted that her mother never made it. That losing her left Claire unmoored, her dreams unfinished, her heart full of regret. But through the pain, one thing remained, her desire to care for others. To use what she had learned, even if she never finished her degree. She explained how she had started quietly offering help to families like his. Parents who were desperate, overworked, drowning under the weight of illness and fear. She wasn't licensed, but she knew how to comfort, how to soothe, how to listen. She knew enough to ease suffering, and she felt that was better than standing by, doing nothing. Her eyes met Ethan's, filled with honesty now, stripped of every mask. She told him she never meant to deceive him, that she had only wanted to bring relief where it was needed. She admitted she should have been truthful from the beginning, but she was afraid he wouldn't give her the chance, afraid she'd lose the opportunity to help Liam, afraid of being dismissed before she could prove her worth. Her words carried no arrogance, no attempt to manipulate. Only regret. Only the raw truth of someone who had lost her way but still clung to the one thing that gave her life meaning, helping people in their darkest hours. And as Ethan listened, the fury that had burned so hot inside him began to change shape. His anger didn't vanish, not completely, but beneath it, another feeling stirred. Compassion. Understanding. Because for the first time, he saw Claire not as a stranger who had lied to him, but as a human being. Flawed, grieving, trying desperately to hold on to the fragments of a dream that had once defined her. It didn't erase the betrayal, but it planted something else. A question. Could he forgive her? And more importantly, could he truly deny the impact she had already made on Liam's life? The truth was out now, and everything between them would be decided by what Ethan chose to do next. Ethan spent the next hours in silence, moving through the house like a shadow. The anger still pulsed in his chest, but beneath it there was something harder to ignore. Every corner of the home carried a memory of Claire now. The sound of Liam's laughter drifting from his room as she read him stories. The calm in the air during nights that used to be filled with fear. The warmth she brought simply by being there. He found himself watching Liam more closely in the days that followed. His sun seemed brighter, lighter, like the weight of his illness no longer pressed down so heavily. And whenever Claire walked into the room, Liam's eyes lit up in a way Ethan hadn't seen in months. That joy was real. It couldn't be faked. It couldn't be denied. But the lie still lingered. Ethan had trusted her with his son, with his family, and she had kept the truth from him. That betrayal dug at him like a splinter he couldn't pull free. Yet every time he thought about asking her to leave, he saw the way Liam reached for her hand. He heard his son whisper her name when nightmares shook him awake. He saw the comfort she gave, comfort he couldn't always provide on his own. Ethan wrestled with it all, anger, relief, gratitude, fear. And then came the moment that broke through his hesitation. One night, Liam woke up coughing harder than usual, his small body racked with exhaustion. Ethan rushed to his side, but Claire was already there, steady and calm, soothing him with words that slowed the panic in his breathing. She moved with care, not with the precision of a licensed nurse, but with the instinct of someone who truly loved. When Liam finally drifted back to sleep, he held her hand as though it were the only thing keeping him safe. Ethan stood there, watching, and the truth pressed down on him harder than ever before. This woman had lied, yes. But she had also given them something far greater than the lie had taken away. She had given them peace. She had given his son happiness. She had given him, Ethan, the chance to breathe again. Later, when the house was quiet, Ethan finally spoke. His voice was low, careful, almost uncertain. He told her he should be furious, that part of him still was. But he also admitted something else. He couldn't ignore what she had done for Liam. He couldn't ignore the way his son had healed, not just in body, but in spirit. And he couldn't deny that somewhere along the way, she had become more than just a caretaker in their lives. Then he made his choice. Instead of letting her go, instead of tearing her from the life she had built with them, he asked her to stay. Not as a nurse, not as an employee, but as part of their family. The words hung in the air, raw and vulnerable. It wasn't forgiveness wrapped in neat edges. It was messy, complicated, imperfect. But it was real. And in that choice, Ethan showed what mattered most to him. Not credentials, not perfection, but love, and the bond that had quietly taken root between them all. For Liam, it meant the world. For Claire, it was the chance she thought she'd lost. And for Ethan, it was the hardest, yet most important, decision he had ever made. The house was quiet that night, the kind of quiet Ethan had longed for but rarely found. Liam was finally resting peacefully after a difficult evening, his small frame curled up beneath the blankets, breathing slow and steady. Ethan lingered in the doorway of his son's room for a moment, watching the rise and fall of his chest, grateful for the calm. Then he closed the door softly and stepped into the living room, where Claire sat alone, her hands folded in her lap, the lamp beside her casting a soft glow across her face. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't cold, but it carried weight. The past days had been filled with tension, with hard truths and difficult choices, and now here they were, sitting across from each other, unsure of where to begin. Ethan lowered himself onto the couch, his voice quiet when he finally broke the silence. He told her thank you. Thank you for being there when he couldn't, for caring for Liam in ways no one else could. His words were simple, but the sincerity in them was undeniable. Claire shook her head, her eyes dropping to her hands. She whispered that she didn't deserve his gratitude, not after deceiving him. She admitted she had expected him to send her away, to shut the door on her and never look back. But instead, he had chosen to let her stay. That choice meant more to her than she could put into words. Ethan leaned forward, searching her expression. He told her he had been angry, that part of him still was, but anger had slowly given way to something else. Something he could no longer ignore. He spoke of how he'd watched Liam change since she came into their lives, how his son's laughter had returned, how his fear at night had begun to fade. He admitted that she had given them both something he hadn't realized they were missing, not just care, but light, hope. Claire's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of relief. She confessed that when she first arrived, she only wanted to help, to feel like she still had a purpose after losing so much. She never expected to find a place that felt like home. And she never expected to feel what she now felt for both Liam and Ethan. The words lingered between them, fragile but honest. Ethan reached out then, his hand resting gently over hers. For a moment, she didn't move, almost afraid to believe it was real. Then she looked up, meeting his eyes, and in that quiet living room, the walls they had both built slowly began to fall away. Ethan told her, in a voice steadier now, that somewhere along the way he had fallen for her. That it terrified him, because it wasn't part of the plan, because he had never imagined opening his heart again. But the truth was undeniable. He loved her presence, her strength, her gentleness, and the way she had already become part of Liam's world. He couldn't imagine asking her to leave. Claire's breath caught, her own voice breaking as she admitted she felt the same. She had tried to push it down, reminding herself of the lie, of the secret that had stood between them. But even through the guilt, even through the fear, her feelings had only grown stronger. At that moment, a small sound came from the hallway. Both turned to see Liam peeking around the corner, his sleepy eyes wide, a mischievous little smile tugging at his lips. He said nothing, just grinned, as if he already understood more than either of them realized. Ethan chuckled softly, motioning him back to bed. Liam disappeared again, but not before giving them one last look that seemed to say everything. He wanted this, too. With the house quiet once more, Ethan turned back to Claire. No more words were needed. He moved closer, closing the distance between them, and when his lips touched hers, it was not the desperate kiss of two people clinging to what they might lose. It was tender, certain, the beginning of something new. In that moment, the weight of the past seemed to lift. For Ethan, it was the first time in years he felt the possibility of a future brighter than the struggles of the present. For Claire, it was the redemption she never thought she'd find. And for both of them, it was the start of a love story not born from perfection, but from healing, trust, and the courage to give each other a second chance. Ethan never imagined that hiring a night nurse would lead him here. What began as desperation, a father too exhausted to keep standing on his own, had turned into something far greater than he could have hoped for. In opening his door to a stranger, he found not just help for his son, but a partner who cared with a depth he hadn't thought possible. What he discovered was that sometimes the people who change our lives the most arrive in ways we don't expect, carrying secrets, carrying scars, but also carrying the kind of love that can mend what's been broken. For Liam, it meant nights that weren't filled with fear anymore. He found comfort, laughter, and the steady presence of someone who gave him joy when sickness tried to take it away. For Claire, it meant redemption. A chance to turn her unfinished past into something meaningful, to give love and receive it in return, to step out of the shadow of guilt and into the light of a new family. And for Ethan, it meant learning to trust again. To let go of perfection and realize that love doesn't always come neatly packaged with certainty and credentials. Sometimes, it comes in the form of a risk, in the courage to see beyond mistakes, and in the willingness to open his heart when it would have been easier to close it. Their story wasn't perfect. It began with sleepless nights, with grief, with a lie that could have torn everything apart. But it ended with something stronger, truth, forgiveness, and the promise of a future built together. A father who fought for his son. A woman who dared to keep caring even when the world told her she couldn't. And a boy who reminded them both what love was truly worth. It's easy to think we know what's best, that we should only accept people who fit every box, who carry every qualification. But life isn't always that clean. Sometimes, the people who aren't perfect on paper are the ones who show up and give us exactly what we need. Ethan saw that. And in the end, he chose not just with his mind, but with his heart. So the question lingers, if you were in his place, what would you have done? Would you have walked away from someone who lied, or would you have looked deeper to see the truth beneath the mistake? For Ethan and Liam, the answer was clear. They chose love. They chose family. And in that choice, their story became less about illness and exhaustion, and more about healing, second chances, and the unexpected ways life can bring us home. Ethan's choice reminds us that sometimes love arrives in the most unexpected ways. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Heartfelt Tales TV for more stories that touch the soul.